Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the show based on the Thrive Bible reading guides. This is an ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive's author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby, and your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to episode 102 of your favourite Bible podcast, Thrive Deeper. It's your old pal DJ Payne here. And on this fortnight's episode, our good friend and pastor Matthew Jacoby and I sit down and we begin. This is part one in a three-part series as we journey into the book of Job, this amazing book in the Old Testament. I'm so excited. I know I say it every other week, but this is one of my favorite books in the Bible, and I love going through this story. It tells us so much and laid such a great foundation about the way we think about God and Satan and our suffering in the world. This is an amazing, amazing journey. I'm glad you're with us. Keep on listening. I've got some important announcements for you that I'll share with you halfway through this week's episode. But right now, let's get into it. The book of Job, part one, on this episode of Thrive Deeper. Matt, we've gone from, in one sense, the end of the book on our last episode of Thrive Deeper. Mm-hmm. We finished the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And now we're going almost to the beginning of the book, to the beginning of the story.
Yes.
In one sense.
In one sense. Yeah. Yeah. And you're, of course, talking about the book of Job and the fact that the book of Job is set in a very early stage in the story, even though it's not really part of the story. It's a bit adjunct to the story.
Yeah, it's almost like, I consider it like a bit of a foundation or a prologue to the narrative that begins with Abraham.
Yeah, again, I don't think it's not actually intended to fit into that story as such. You know what I mean? It's more of the book of Job belongs to the wisdom literature, and it plays a role within that wisdom literature, which is really about the whole thing, even though it seems clearly based on or situated in that early stage.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
And not even in the land of Israel.
No,
there's in the east.
Yes.
In some Uz, the land of Uz. Where is that?
We have no idea.
We don't really know. Maybe down in the region of Edom, southeast.
Yes.
Maybe northeast, up in Syria.
Yep.
Possibly.
There's a few different ideas around it.
There's a few different ideas.
So we're starting the next three episodes, this episode and the next two episodes, around the book of Job.
Yes.
That we're going through in the Thrive Daily Reading Guide. I, for one, am excited about the book of Job because it is such a dense book. I remember growing up reading the Bible, and the book of Job was both, how do I express this in the right way, exciting because of the beginning and the end of the book of Job was really exciting to me growing up. But then all the middle part was so dense. So it was always like this mysterious book, because I realized pretty quickly that a lot of these people that are speaking all the speeches in the book of Job are not exactly to be taken literally and commands for me to live my life.
Yeah.
Some of these are really wrong ideas. Yeah. And so it's
which
always...
is the part of the point. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was almost, for me growing up, I would say my beginning understanding about the concept of philosophy was birthed in the book of Job.
Yeah, that's right.
So as you come to the book of Job, what's your history with it? What's your take on it? What are you excited about it for?
Well, I really love this book. In fact, it has one of my favourite verses in the Bible in it, which is towards the end, where Job says, "Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know."
Yeah.
That for me is the sort of catch cry of my life.
Yeah.
I feel. I also love the fact that Job does something quite different to any other part of the Bible.
Yeah.
So it is a wisdom book, and it is very philosophical in nature. So it's very close, in fact, to something like the Socratic dialogues that Plato wrote. So Plato brings out all of his philosophy in dialogue form, where he has Socrates as a speaker and then other speakers, and then they debate things. And it's very much like that because it's a kind of a dialogue, and yet it's very poetic as well. The whole way that there are these poetic expressions of different points of view. And of course, Job deals with one of the most pressing issues of life. It's very poignant in that it deals with the problem of suffering.
Yeah.
And, Job suffers terribly, is trying to understand why this is. And so it's dealing with an issue that is an issue throughout the biblical story in some way.
Yeah.
Of course, in Deuteronomy, there are the blessings and curses, and if you do the right thing, you'll be blessed, and if you do the wrong thing, you'll be cursed. And that carries through, and in an ultimate sense, that is true.
Yeah.
And I say in an ultimate sense, that may not be, we may not be blessed in this life necessarily, but ultimately it is true.
Yeah.
Well, Job is dealing with this life and the reason for why do good people suffer and even perhaps bad people don't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that kind of thing.
It's some big questions being asked in this book. So let's do an overview. And I just wanted to touch on really, really quickly. This book has been so influential in Western culture and thought.
It has. In fact, university literature courses sometimes have the Book of Job as a piece of literature because it's very literary in its quality. It has these, as I said, these poetic moments right throughout it. It has a very literary structure. You've got the opening prologue that sets up the scene. It's almost like a kind of play.
Yeah,
set up like a play.
Alfred Lord, here's a few recommendations, 5-star reviews.
Okay, yeah.
Of the Book of Job. Alfred Lord Tennyson called it the greatest poem of ancient or modern times. So basically the greatest poem of all time. We also see it directly influencing, some great writers. Some of your favourites, I know, Matt. The Russian writer Dostoevsky.
Yeah, Dostoevsky, yeah.
Yeah, he the themes of Job come up in especially one of his books.
The Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you for being able to pronounce all those Russian words that I can't. William Blake illustrated the entire Book of Job. There's been plays, writings, even up until recently, works and literary works about the Book of Job keep winning awards. Like, it is known as one of the most foundational, as you say, books about wisdom, about life, about the thoughts about who God is. Carl Jung, some of the real Jung fans say that his work on the Book of Job is the greatest thing that he ever wrote. And he really...
Yeah, I got that actually about a year ago. It's sitting in my shelf. I haven't looked at it yet, but yeah, Carl Jung's book on Job.
Yeah, and it's can I
add to that list?
Yeah.
If the Tree of Life, the film, the Terrence Malick film,
definitely
is based on the Book of Job.
And I see your Tree of Life film, and I give you another film, the Coen Brothers, A Serious Man.
Right.
Coen Brothers, the duo who's given us so many great movies and some of my favourite films. Very black comedy, not as self-serious as Malick, but A Serious Man is like a modern Jewish retelling. When I say modern, set like in the 60s or 70s, of a guy who is plagued by circumstances beyond his control and what is it's a very different take on it. If you're up for Coen Brothers and you like their films, I really recommend A Serious Man.
I love what Terrence Malick does with this because at the start of the film you've got this scene where there's clearly been a loss, the loss of a child.
Yes.
And at the start it's got a quote from Job at the start. So that's kind of the key clue. And then you've got this scene of loss and then it goes back to the Big Bang and follows the whole process through in this amazing cinematography and special effects and it puts it all in context and then it follows another kind of line of reflection, the kind of tension between nature and grace and the mother's grace and the father represents nature and it's the sort of tension. It's kind of doing a Job-like thing, exploring that tension.
Yeah.
I love it. Another film by
here we go.
By my one of my favorite filmmakers, the Russian Andrei Zvyagintsev.
Oh yes,
he made a film called Leviathan, which is based around some themes in Job.
I was about it was on my list here. So that's the modern culture. So I want to let everybody know, you might come into this book. I know some people come into this book with a bit of trepidation, but I want to let you know, hey, it's important for a reason. If you can get through it, you're going to be rewarded for it.
Yeah.
You're going to be rewarded for it.
It's the biblical answer to the most commonly raised objection to belief in God.
The other, and again, the other side of it is amongst other religions, the book of Job is held very high. And I know we're not, that doesn't really mean much for us, whether it's the Quran or other Middle Eastern beliefs. The book of Job or even the person of Job is held in high regard as either a saint, a prophet, or someone close to God. So it's a very important book. Now, and for me, it's foundational. And I'll go back to where I'm coming from, Matt, because I want you to answer this a little bit. We don't know really who wrote it.
No.
Some traditions say it was one of the books that Moses and his team collected. Other people say it came a lot later. There's a lot of different tradition and things. The language in the book of Job, very different to the language of the rest of the Bible, rest of the Old Testament in particular.
Yeah.
Even the writing structure and everything like that, it's very well thought out. The reason why I'll go back to one of my original statements that I see it as very foundational is because I really do, in my brain, in my Bible nerd, and again, we've mentioned this countless times before, I was growing up in a very dispensationalist tradition. This went here, this went there, and this book went here. So my understanding was the book of Job was in this period before God made a covenant with Abraham. So I see God relating to Job in a very different way that he does, and it's almost, again, from what I've read on the cheat notes of Carl Jung, he sort of says the same thing. He's like, and again, I don't want to. This is not what I believe, but this is his expression of it. It's almost like God learnt from this experience. Well, I'm not going to do that again. I need to do something different. You know what? I'll make a covenant promise with the people and do something. And it's sort of like out of the book of Job, everyone learned something, including God. And again.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Again, I haven't read the Jung book, and I'm not a big fan of Carl Jung in that way. But it's in my when I read those cheat notes on his book, I went, man, that's almost what I took away from it as a kid. That the book of Job is so mysterious and impersonal, and God is this entity out there, and Job doesn't really get to see a lot of the things. And then when we get to Abraham, it's a completely different relationship. And then when we get to Moses, it's even deeper. And then it sort of builds from there. So
yeah. Well, it's certainly set in that period.
Yes.
And there are a number of indications of a patriarchal setting. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily written in that setting.
Yes.
Look. This could be the story could have been passed down.
Yes.
So first of all, I think it's worth just saying some people treat Job as just a fictional character,
a parable, like it's a big parable,
like a parable.
Yeah.
I would see Job as a historical figure, partly because Ezekiel refers to Daniel, Job, and Noah. Mm-hmm. Refers to them as real people. Yep. So certainly in the biblical tradition, he was a real person, and it was known. So by the time of Ezekiel, which is in the exile, Job is known.
And some traditions would say that was the time Ezekiel and his team were the ones that wrote down the oral tradition or the scraps or whatever they had.
That put it together.
Yeah.
But certainly the story may have been there. Now it belongs, and also James, by the way, refers to Job. Refers to, what does he say, the suffering of Job or something like that in James chapter 5.
It is quoted in, and it is referred back to and quoted in other books of the Bible as well, not just those two.
Those are the main two references. I don't know of any other.
Okay.
But that's enough to say.
Yeah.
Look, in a biblical point of view, this guy's historical. The story, though, is very literary, and it's poeticized in the sense that all the speeches are given a poetic render.
Yes.
And I think that's a beautiful thing, actually, about the book, is that the way the story is structured. And
even for a literalist like me, you know, I am a hardcore literalist.
Yeah.
My first reaction is this is a like someone had pressed record on the action, and we're getting a literal thing. Even for someone like me, I go, well, I think this might be a stylized rendering of, you know, this might be a beautiful painting rendition of an actually happened. Yeah,
that's right. I think this belongs to a kind of line of reflection that probably comes about later in Israel's history when the blessing and the neat blessing and curse formula looked like it wasn't working out so well. So you see this theme in a number of bits of biblical literature. The book of Habakkuk is a book that struggles with why are evil doers being seemingly blessed, and why are we being punished?
Yep.
You know, and then he goes on that famous poem, though there be no fruit in the vine, you know, no whatever in the stalls, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. And then Psalm 73 as well is like the book of Job in a psalm. You know, it's about this man who's suffering terribly, and why are, you know, all of these godless people are being blessed, and why am I seemingly cursed? And then he has this encounter with God, very much like Job, and recognizes that he has God, and that's enough in a sense. And so, there's a period there where, which I think is also the sort of heyday of this wisdom tradition that comes from Solomon and develops from that period. And somewhere there, this wisdom tradition emerges.
Yeah.
And it belongs somewhere. I would suggest it belongs somewhere in that period.
Yeah. Okay. And it's important that, you know, even though it's not, you know, we love to, as Protestants, you know, do, you know, Scripture, interpret Scripture type of thing, and we want the interpretation to come out of the Bible itself. The idea of a wisdom, and it's a very common idea, you know, that's been around for the last couple of 100 years, this wisdom literature part of the Bible. I mean, the Bible doesn't, you know, the Old Testament doesn't say, and now here's the wisdom literature. In fact, if anything, the Bible says the entire Bible is wisdom. But we, in our modern, you know, wanting to categorize things in the Bible, we pull out the book of Proverbs, the book of Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, depending on which way you want to cut it up, and Job. You know, sometimes people add some other stuff in there as well, but
and there are a number of wisdom psalms as well.
Exactly, as in this category of wisdom literature in the Bible, and you know, even though, you know, that's a little bit whatever, I do think it's helpful because those three books together, especially, you know, the three basic ones, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job, read together, I think they give you a fuller picture of the wisdom of God.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, this is something I had a look at the Bible Project summary of Job, and they place it firmly within Proverbs, which is very much the formulaic, if you do the right thing, you'll be blessed. If you don't, you'll be cursed.
Yes.
And then Ecclesiastes, which complains about the fact that
that's not true.
None of that seems to work. And then Job that kind of gives an answer to that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's that neat, actually.
Yeah, it's not. It's definitely not. And it's funny.
I thought that was a little too neat.
And it's funny listening to, shout out to the Bible Project guys, listening to their more recent thoughts around the book of Job and wisdom literature. They've actually said, I think we cut it up a little too neat in that video. They've actually recognised that, you know, it's a real narrow way of looking at it, the way that they presented it.
Yeah.
But for an entering understanding, like a foundational understanding, I think it's a good step. Then as you
I think that's
as you progress in the Bible, you realise, hang on, it's all a bit bigger than this.
Yeah, sometimes simplistic frameworks are good as a start.
Yes, amen, amen.
So the basic structure of the book of Job, and I guess this is how we'll cover it
over the next 3 episodes.
Over the next 3 episodes, is you've got the prologue, and there's a lot of stuff there to discuss, and we'll focus on that today. And then you've got the the discussion between the friends, the interaction. There's 3 friends initially,
Yep.
and then Job kind of answers, and they're trying to give reasons, and then there's another young guy comes in at the end,
Yes.
making a little bit more sense. But so that's kind of a whole section, the discussion.
Yes.
And then at the end, the final section is when God turns up.
God shows up.
And I love that bit.
That's the exciting bit. And I don't want to rush into that bit because I really hate again, shout out to the Bible Project, but a lot of teachers who talk about the book of Job, they give away the ending straight away. And I think that really, as someone who loves narrative and movies and storytelling, I'm like, you're spoiling the end of the story. What are you doing? And I think it's important that we sit, in the tragedy and the mystery of it for so long that when the end happens, we are like, whoa, it really means something to us.
Yeah.
I've actually, I used to do this at Bible college all the time. And if you're wanting to go deeper in a book of the Bible, this is something that a few of my, and I'd love to know what your tradition says, Matt, that my teachers way back in the day, they said, if you want to understand a book a little bit better, look at other narratives and what do you call it, commentaries and things like that. But once you've looked at all them, put them to one side, sit down with the Bible, with the book itself, and write your own outline. Okay. How would you break it down, as in an outline there? Now, the book of Job is really easy. It's a great starter one to do this because it's a really clearly outlined narrative, type of thing. So I've written my own outline, the DJ outline here of the book of Job. I'm going to put that up in the show notes of this episode on the website there. Yeah, good. So if you want to see that and how it breaks down, and it's a beautifully broken down, structured literary work. And we're going to get into like you said, this one is just going to be the first 2 chapters. There's so much here to unpack in the first 2 chapters, and then we get into what I call round 1, round 2, round 3, with Job going back and forth with his friends, and finally his youngest friend turns up. We'll get into this when we get there. Interesting point about the youngest friend that I found out today. He's the only one with a Jewish name.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and he's the only one that has a bit more wisdom than the others, and he's the only one that God doesn't say, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So interesting thought about that. And then finally, in that final act is God shows up, a discussion between God and Job, and then the final conclusion we find out there. So I'm looking forward to going through that over the next few episodes. So as we launch into the first, couple of chapters here, we are introduced straight off the back to the character Job.
That's right, to Job. So Job is a blameless and upright man. He lives in the land of Uz. Now, we've already said that we don't really know where that is, but it is referred to elsewhere in Scripture. And it seems to be either, the 2 main options are either down in the land of Eden, or in Syria. It's
not Eden.
Edom. Sorry, Edom, not
yep.
Edom. Edom.
Yeah.
It is. There's a sense that he lives in the east, though, and this is an interesting point because the whole wisdom tradition is often pictured as coming from the east.
Yeah.
And so Job kind of lives here in this place.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting because he's not part of the sort of covenant line.
No.
He's just a person out there,
and not just any person. One of the greatest, of these wise men, successful men of the East.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it shows that God is not sort of limited to just this family line or this people group. I mean, God is working primarily through his, through the nation of Israel, and then through the church in nation of Israel in the Old Testament, and then the church in the New Testament. But that doesn't mean that he has no dealings with people that are separated from that or have never heard because here you have Job who has this relationship with God, and he just stands right outside the main story. And I think I love that, first of all.
And the introduction to Job as this wise and great wise person who's blameless. He feared God. He's doing the right thing. Straight away, you are brought into the thinking that you get in the book of Proverbs. you do things right, you deal fairly with people, and God gives you success.
That's right.
And we see that. Well, he's got lots of success.
That's right. And you see this, the fact that he has all of these possessions, and he's obviously blessed, and he was the greatest man, it says, among all the peoples of the East.
Wow.
So this is in the East. Now, this is interesting, again, the sort of reference to the East, because the East is often where a lot of the trouble came from, and so I just find that interesting, again, that here in the midst of the East is this godly man, as well as the fact that, as I said, it's where the kind of wisdom tradition hails from. So, he makes sacrifices for his children just in case they, after their parties and whatever, he's concerned with making things right. He offers burnt offerings. Now, again, that in the context of the Bible, that makes some sense, but he's not doing that within any particular law.
No.
He's just doing that sort of intuitively. And it's interesting that in all different kinds of religions around the world, this inclination, innate sort of sense that we need to make things right with God, and often sacrifice is a way of doing that. It's interesting to note that even in religions that are quite different and disconnected from each other.
And we definitely see that practice in the Bible before God calls people to do it. We see, right from the very beginning, God calling Cain and Abel, to do that type of thing. We see Noah responding to God when he wants to make a relationship. There's a sacrifice. We see these different things, and so Job's in that that area there, realizing that in some way in the God creator world that he's living in, you sacrifice an animal to God for the sins. In asking God to excuse those sins.
Yeah, that's right. So there's some innate sense here that there's something that needs to be paid for.
Yeah.
So in some ways this is a faint little Christological moment, perhaps here with the offering. Perhaps that could be pushing it, but
what do you mean by that? Flesh that out.
In the sense that there is in Job there is this sort of innate sense that a payment needs to be made.
Yes,
and he makes this to God in the belief that God will accept this payment.
Amen.
Well, God, anyone who was ever forgiven by God, even those that never are not in the biblical tradition, or even perhaps never heard of Christ, if they have or had a relationship with God, it is only because of Christ.
Yeah.
Because Christ made that possible for people to be forgiven.
And you're bringing almost one of my, like I've said, the New Testament wisdom book of Hebrews almost, you're bringing that to bear, that it wasn't the fact that he was killing animals. The animal didn't take away the sin. It was his faith that God one day would be able to, to do that. And through Christ.
It was his faith that God would accept that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But we know the reason is because of what Christ has done.
Yeah.
So this is not saying that, this is an interesting point. It says that he was blameless and upright. Now, of course, theologically, from a New Testament perspective, we would say, but was he sinless?
Of course not.
Yeah, that's not the point here, really. The point here is that his life warrants the blessing of God in the kind of Deuteronomic sense, that the blessings and curses sense. Okay, he walks with God.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Yeah, and we're given the amount of beautiful round numbers of his sheep, his camels, his oxen, his donkeys. He had many servants. He's got 7 sons and 3 daughters. They are all in good relationship with one another. They're in good standing. They celebrate together. Job is part of their lives. He's purifying them. They're all, they're taking turns celebrating with each other. And it's like if we stop the story right now,
it's all good.
It's fantastic.
Right. But it's interesting to note what now happens in the story, because something happens here that's very much like the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Where we, come up here, God says to John, and I'll show you the control room of the universe.
Yes.
In the heavenly realms. And so John in the book of Revelation is taken up into the sort of heavenly courtroom.
Yeah.
And the same thing, we get the same picture
and on
Job 1.
On our sister podcast, on our other podcast, Thrive Perspectives, we've just finished a series on the spiritual realm and spiritual beings.
Yep.
And this plays perfectly.
Yeah, it does.
Into what we're doing there. So let's take a quick break because we're about to go into heaven. All right, let's take a quick break, and this is where the action really takes place. So we'll be back in just a minute with the Book of Job here on Thrive Deeper. Hey there, family. It's your old buddy, your old pal, your old mate, DJ Payne here. And please do not fast forward this bit. I know some of you are tempted to fast forward through my middle section here so you can get back into the good stuff. But trust me, I've got something really important I want to share with you today. Firstly, head over to thrivetoday.tv. That's our home online. We've done a big refresh of the website. It's really different. And the best part about it is that you have an opportunity to partner with us as a financial supporter. And this is so important. The ministry that we work on here at Thrive goes out to so many hundreds of people around the world, and we can't do that without your financial support. So please head over to thrivetoday.tv. You'll see an opportunity to do that. Now, secondly, I wanted to share with you that next Friday, a week from when this episode is going out, on the 28th of August 2020, on the 28th of August, next Friday, is the next episode of our sister podcast, Thrive Perspectives. Now, this is a very special episode of Thrive Perspectives. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while. It's a big picture of the entire universe, of what it is all about. What is a big picture of this whole God thing, this Christian thing? Who is Jesus? Why did he have to come? Where do we fit into it? It's what in the world is God doing? What is everything all about? I know there's some pretty big questions. What is the big picture of everything? But we're going to attempt that on the next episode of Thrive Perspectives. And the reason why we want to do that, and I'm letting you know, is because we want you to have something, a tool in your tool chest, something that you can use to give to that family member, to give to that friend, that work colleague, one episode, 1 hour of a conversation that sort of outlines what this whole Christianity thing is all about and makes it really simple to understand. That's our goal, and I want you to be praying now about who God would have you share that with. Don't blanket it over everybody. Don't shout it from the rooftops. But I want you to think of one person that when this episode comes out, you can have a listen to it and you can share it with them. We've got a really exciting plan around that. So please head over to Thrive Perspectives, subscribe to that in your podcast listening device, app, whatever you use, because next week we've got a really special episode. All right, that's enough from me for now. Let's get back into the book of Job as we begin this journey over the next few episodes on Thrive Deeper in Job. And we are back. It is DJ and Matthew. We are on Thrive Deeper. It's our 102nd episode, and we are beginning our deep dive into one of the most amazing books in the Old Testament, the book of Job. Now, Matt, we've just given people the introduction to Job himself. That really just covers the first 5 verses of chapter 1 of book of Job. And now in verse 6 in chapter 1, we, zoom cut, pan up from Job there on earth into the heavenly realm.
Yeah, and so what is pictured here is a kind of heavenly courtroom where all of these spiritual beings referred to. Now, in the NIV, it says in verse 6, one day the angels came, but the Hebrew literally in Hebrew, it's the sons of God came,
Yeah.
and that's how it's translated in, for example, the ESV, which is a more literal translation.
And then in an interpretive style, like the NLT does, the New Living
I
Translation,
like the NLT rendering of this. Read it.
it says, one day, the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves.
Yeah. I think that's a great sort of dynamic translation, because that's what's happening.
Exactly.
It paints a great picture. That is what's happening. So there's a kind of heavenly court. The sons of God, well, one of the issues with the word, with angels, is that, as Michael Heiser points out in his book, The Unseen Realm, we talked about that in the other podcast.
In Thrive Perspectives, yeah.
Is that angels is a function. It's a certain role, a messenger. So it seems, and there's some evidence that there's some kind of hierarchy amongst spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so look, first of all, there's not just God in the heavenly realms. There are God and other spiritual beings, often referred to as Elohim.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
which is the same word that we translate sometimes in the Old Testament to God.
To God, that's right. So Elohim actually is a kind of a spiritual being.
Yes.
An Elohim. Now, God is the Elohim, the ultimate God, and there is none like him. And
the Elohim of Elohim.
That's
right.
The
top of his class.
That's the way it's put. That's right. So these other spiritual beings are nothing like God. They are created beings. And here we see them coming and forming a kind of advisory court, not advisory court, a sort of a participatory court where they participate in sort of managing the world. This is the sense that you get.
And this is a picture that when, this is my big takeaway for the last 2 episodes we've done on Thrive Perspectives, really deep diving into the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And it's helped me got a better understanding, if my little brain will ever get a better understanding of the person of God, the Yahweh himself, right? He operates the part of his beating, passion or heart of who he is wanting to operate in relationship with his created beings.
Yeah.
Both us here in this realm, but in the spiritual realm, he does the same thing. He wants to deal this in relationship and bring those into his, that's what he does with the spiritual realm.
That's right. Yeah. And so here you have these sons of God, as they're called, and they're presiding in this heavenly court. And then we have the Satan.
Wow.
And Satan means accuser. So the accuser. Now there's some debate around who this is. Some people say that, look, the traditional view, and the view that I hold, I'll put that straight up front, is that this is Satan as in the devil.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the most popular view in evangelical circles with respect
I would
to that.
sit there with you, yeah.
But some have questioned that and suggested that, no, this is just a prosecuting spirit.
Yes.
That also actually is the view that Michael Heiser takes in the Unseen Realm. And
he has reasons for it.
And he has reasons for that. The reason I would disagree with that is, first of all, because of what we see, Satan is mentioned a couple of other times in the narrative, is in the story around David, where David was incited, and Zechariah, book of Zechariah. Now, in both of those cases, I do actually think it is actually Satan the devil, and I would connect that with the being who turns up in the garden.
Okay, yes.
Who is also Satan. Yeah. Now, I think that's evident from what actually is being said here.
Exactly. I think
there's a kind of challenge here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And again, recommend that you go listen to the other 2 episodes about the spiritual realm. We go into it a lot deeper. Satan is not his name. In fact, this entity that rebels against God and wants to take humanity down, that we call Satan, is not ever named in Scripture.
Right. Yeah.
He is given things like the old dragon, the red dragon, this Satan, the accuser, the devil,
the adversary,
the adversary.
In the New Testament, yeah.
You know, and even some people would go, well, he was a fallen angel, and his real name is Lucifer. Well, not really. If you actually deep dive into it, as in that's his name, type of thing.
Yeah.
So we don't really know his name. But this, you and I are both saying that this entity, the Satan, is the one that we traditionally would think of as the devil, the overriding prince of this, this realm, who is orchestrating and organising this rebellion against God.
Yep. So the question that raises for some people who think that this isn't Satan is, what is he doing here in the heavenly court? Well, I think there's a very good answer to that, is that he is accountable. I mean, this is a very strong theological point, that he is actually accountable to God. He can do nothing other than what God allows. And we see that to be true of all evil spirits, all of these fallen, rebellious spiritual beings.
We see that to be true all the way through the entire Scripture, and especially played out in the book of Revelation.
Yeah, that's right. Revelation, this is a big part of Revelation.
Yeah, when God says, and like right here, when God says, okay, heavenly beings, present yourselves to me.
Yeah.
Satan has no choice than turning up.
Yeah. So we get a similar scene to this in the story of Ahab and Jehoshaphat, when they're thinking, they're wondering whether they should go into a certain battle, and Micaiah the prophet comes, and he has this vision. He said, "I had this vision of the heavenly realms," and and God was discussing with his angelic, with these spiritual beings.
Yeah.
I should take away the word angelic. They're just spiritual beings. And, what should we do here? And one spiritual being says, I will go and be a lying spirit in the mouths of the prophet, of the false prophets, to, deceive Ahab so that he goes to his death, because he's not willing to listen to God. Yeah. So in a sense, this spirit says, hand him over to me. Let me have it. Hand it over to me.
And God says,
okay.
Yeah. I hand him over to you.
And very clearly, this is a lying spirit. So this is not a
good, not a heavenly creature.
And then also we read about King Saul, that God's an evil spirit from the Lord, it says, in 1 Samuel 19, verse 9, tormented King Saul. So an evil spirit from the Lord. So God is using these evil spirits, they do what they do for their own irrational, evil purposes.
Yes.
But ultimately, God is in control. Now, that's an important perspective here, actually, for the book of Job.
And this is it. This is
because God is sovereign in this book.
A major foundational element here as we go into the book of Job. And it's important to remember, as we're setting up this scene in heaven, and we now get introduced to the Satan and, the Lord of Lords here.
Yeah.
This is a scene that Job isn't seeing.
No, that's right.
Job is minding his own business.
Yeah.
Job is doing what he believes to be the right thing to do down there. And this is almost like in a comic book. Meanwhile, in heaven, and this is an amazing, and it sort of gives a hint to what's going to happen at the end.
Yeah.
There's something vastly bigger. This spiritual realm is really where the decisions are made.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's one of the great things about this book, is that it reminds us that we live our lives here in the midst of a
spiritual battle. Yeah.
There is a universe of spiritual activity in the unseen realm around our lives, often with respect to our lives, that we don't see or hear. And that's one of the perspectives. Now, that's not... someone said to me recently, because I pointed out the fact that God actually never gives an answer to Job's suffering.
Don't spoil the ending.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
No,
and someone said, no, it does, because it gives this scene at the start.
Yeah.
But this actually isn't an answer, because there's no. It doesn't answer why God will.
In one sense, this is the paradox of the book of Job, and the paradox of a lot of the Bible is that even though we are given an answer, as in we get to see in heaven the reason behind it, it gives us so many more questions.
That's right. It leads to more questions. So what we're given is a bigger perspective,
yes,
but not an answer.
So right here in verse 7, the Lord, Yahweh there on from the throne says, "Oh, Satan, where have you come from?" And this is what I think, and the personality of this entity really gives away the fact that this is the Satan. This is the one, because his attitude here. And I love the way different translations, portray this out here. He says, "I've been patrolling the earth. Watching going wherever I want to go, doing whatever I want to do, watching what's going on."
That's right. And the boast here, and this I think is important context for what God says next, because Satan is boasting and saying, "I can go wherever I want in this earthly realm." Yeah. Why? Because human beings gave me permission.
Yeah.
And that this is what brings us back to Genesis chapter 3.
Exactly.
What actually happens there, by yielding to that temptation, human beings join that spiritual rebellion, join that rebellion against God.
Yep.
And so, in a sense, Satan can, and these rebellious spirits can kind of hide under the cover of human authority. So there's a sense in which, by now controlling human beings, Satan has free reign of the earth, kind of through their authority.
Yeah.
And so Jesus refers to Satan as the prince of this world.
Yeah.
Now, very clearly in Genesis 1, it was human beings created as the children of God, the image bearers of God. And, we are to be the prince of this world. And yet that's now been abdicated over to Satan. And so he's boasting about that here, and he's saying, "I can go wherever I want." Why? Because, I control these human beings and they've given me permission, which leads to verse 8.
Yeah, well, and again, it's really important here, because this Satan is basically saying, I've come from where I can patrol. I've come from my, this is my place. Doing what, he's really putting it in his face, putting in God's face, and the rest of the heavenly court.
And we should point out that God can't destroy him without destroying human beings.
Yeah.
Because God is honouring the authority that he gave to human beings.
Yeah.
He put them in charge.
Yeah.
And what they say goes. That's God, when God empowers, he doesn't disempower. It says in Romans 11:29, I think, the gifts and the call of God are irrevocable. He doesn't take it back.
Yeah.
So when human beings said, Satan, we'll join you and you can stay, he stays.
Yeah. And God,
God, in a sense, honours that.
Yeah.
For a purpose.
For a bigger purpose. And I believe we are seeing one of the foundational cornerstone understandings about why this is all going to play out the way that it plays out, that we read throughout history and the world. So now this is where a lot of people start scratching their head. Verse 8, it is the Lord who asks Satan. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
The Lord asks Satan, so have you noticed my good friend Job down here?
Yeah.
And it's like, and now those of us who've read the story a few times, when we go back to this part, we go, zip it, God, don't say, why bring him up? What are you doing? Leave him out of it.
And the reason here, I think, is because Job has just boasted that he has free reign on the earth, that he's in, and I think implicitly then that he has this level of control.
Yeah.
And so God's saying, no, actually, you don't control this one.
Exactly.
And that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so Satan wants to say, oh, no, yes, I am, actually. I do. He's not really with you, he's with me.
Yeah.
So this is actually a contest over who is Job with.
Yeah.
Is he... Because Satan's challenge is, no, he's only with you conditionally.
Yeah.
He's only, not genuinely, he's with you because you bless him and you give him all of this stuff.
And we see that sliminess, that smarminess from him, and that attitude, that personality of the Satan here in verse 9. And he says, yeah. But it's only because he's got good reason.
Yeah.
He's doing it for protection and your property that you've given him, and you've made him prosper. I tell you right now, if you take away all that, he will be mine.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like,
it says he will curse you to your face.
Yeah. Oh boy. And the scary thing is here, Satan's not making that up. Like I'm saying that Satan is saying this from experience to God.
Yeah.
And the heavenly court and God are looking at him going, well, we've seen this play out before.
Yeah.
There's bad things have happened to people. They curse God and they follow Satan.
Yeah. And by cursing God merely means, I guess, taking that divine prerogative into our own hands, saying, oh, that's it, I'm going to be the God of my own life. That's really what it means to curse God. So God says to Satan in verse 12, very well, then everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. So here we see God allowing something to happen. In the context of this, to sort of show something about Job. Now, again, like you said, that doesn't really answer the question. It raises more questions. Well, why is this necessary? Now, we'll get to we won't give that away. We'll talk about that when we get to the end. So Satan goes out and basically, to cut a long story short, Job, one messenger comes from one place, another place. All of this has been taken. All of this has been destroyed. Your children have been attacked and they're all dead. And it's just just he and his wife left. And
every servant says the same thing. This has all happened. All these horrible things have happened. Either raiders have come, lightning has come, a wind has come and crushed everybody. I'm the only one to get out and bring you this news.
Yeah, that's right.
You've lost everything.
And Job replies saying, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. This is one of the most profound and famous moments in the Bible. It's like this is a moment of amazing devotion to God right here. This is him letting God be God. The thing that I tell you something that just riles me, right? Is those who would look at that and say, well, see, that's why this happened. Because I don't know if you've heard this before. Well, they said this is why this happened, because of his lack of faith. Like, naked I depart, the Lord gave. They say, the Lord gives and the Lord never takes away. He just gives. And they would refer to where Job says I think a little further on, where Job says, what I feared has come upon me. And they would point to that and say, there you go. That's why it happened. Because of his fear and his lack of faith, all of this happened. Now, this comes out of the prosperity movement.
And totally foreign to
the prosperity gospel movement. So I'm just putting that out there because one of the most ridiculous of all the ridiculous things that prosperity teaches.
Because they have to ignore verse 22 of chapter 1. In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Like that's the end of chapter 1.
That's right.
He has everything taken away from him. Satan takes everything away. God gives Satan the ability to kill off his sons and his daughters and any, spouses, grandchildren, anything like that away from them. And in all of that, he goes, you know what? This has all been a blessing that I did not deserve anyway, because I came naked. I'm going to leave naked. I brought nothing into this world. I can take nothing out of it. Blessed be your name, God. It's all yours anyway. And then chapter 2.
That's right. So round 2, we have a repeat, and this is the literary quality of this. Another day the sons of God came, present themselves before the Lord. Satan also came with him. And again, you get the same dialogue. Where have you come from? Satan replies, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth in it. Again, God says, have you considered my servant Job?
Same thing.
So it's set up in a very literary manner here. And then God says he is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. That's what he said before. Then he says, and he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him, incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. That's an interesting statement, isn't it?
Oh, boy, it is an interesting statement. It's almost like it's not. And again, I'm going to use that. This is a very bad transliteration here. It's almost like God saying, "Look, even though you tricked me last time, and you made me take away all these stuff." He's not tricked. He's not tricked at all. But it's like he's saying, we came into this agreement. You provoked me to say, okay, you could do it.
It was a challenge. I think the right word there is that Satan presented a challenge, and God answered that challenge. And I think it's significant that it says here, though you incited me against him, to ruin him without reason. Now, again, if you're coming to this, what is the reason for this suffering? No, at a very fundamental level, they're kind of, well, let me say, on one level there isn't a reason, but at some bigger level, on some ultimate.
Well, of course, I mean, the reason we can see the reason here, it was a challenge about the very deep-rooted question that all humans have. You know, if bad things happen to us, do we, you know, what does that mean to God?
Yeah.
And that's what Satan's challenging, that narrative. And God is saying, okay, let's enter into answer this question in this life of Job. Now, is that a reason?
Yeah.
Well, God himself says, maybe not, but we're going to let it play out.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to point out there is that Satan belongs in a sense to the forces of chaos. Okay,
Yes.
So and the forces of chaos are irrational. There's an irrationality to them. So Satan is acting irrationally.
Yeah.
I think that's the point here. So, and this is where I think it's important to recognize when bad things happen, looking for a reason isn't even the right way to even think about this, because it implies that everything that happens in the world is rational,
Including
in some sense.
evil. And
Including
evil is not rational.
No.
Evil has no reason.
It's all part of the world descending into chaos, right?
Yeah.
It's not the way God wants it to be.
100%.
So I think this validates that sense when suffering comes. It's just bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, the perspective that we have here is that it belongs to some bigger picture, and God allows this for
part of the story.
Yeah. that only he can grasp.
And we get to grasp it here. God is giving us a glimpse to understand why and how and everything like this. Chapter 2.
We get part of the picture, obviously, because it's important in the context of the book of Job that no one really can even begin to understand these things. But
Chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. Satan again replies, and again, this is from the New Living Translation. Yeah. Skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his own life, but you reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to her face. Yeah. So the two challenges from Satan in the two courtroom scenes that we see in heaven is two things that I believe are the most important things to most human beings: my family and my possessions, and my health.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of adages, a lot of wisdom is out there, common wisdom about, hey, as long as you have your health, you know, as long as you've got your family, as long as you know, and Satan is rightly saying, hey, take those two things from him, and he will come to my side.
And I think it also shows that really the thing that God cares about the most, like way, way beyond those things. It's not like God doesn't care about our lives in those ways. But what God really cares about, the ultimate thing, is, are you with me or are you not?
Yeah.
Everything else just fades next to that point. So
Satan again departs. God says, look, you can touch him, do whatever you want to him, just spare his life. You cannot kill him. Yep. So Satan strikes him with terrible boils from head to feet.
Painful sores, probably boils,
sores. They're, disgusting, descriptions of them. Like they're pussing, they're oozing, they're all over him. So Job is sitting in ashes, scraping them with broken pottery.
It's a sorry picture,
and just the absolute. He's in the absolute bottom of the barrel, so we think. And even his wife, the one person who is there with him,
she loses it.
She loses it, and she's like, "What are you doing? Are you still trying to maintain some integrity?
Curse God and die.
Just curse God and die. What are you doing?"
Yeah,
like she's obviously miserable. Now, I think there's a point here to be made that in all of this, I mean, the amazing relationship. This is a very reading between the lines, thing. As in God, Satan is allowed to take away all these different elements of his life, but he can't touch his wife. And I think that speaks to, again, this is real between the lines stuff, that real sacred union between a man and a wife.
Yeah.
Does in some things you'd think he'd take away the wife as well, but no. Job and his wife are, considered by God to be, exactly. So I think that's why, again, that's a real between the lines thing. But anyway, so she's no help to him. he says, look, again, another amazing thing. And this reminds me because our dear, a very dear friend of ours, the late, great, Richard Beachy, he actually quoted this verse to me one of the last times I caught up with him.
Right.
He said, look, should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? So in all of this, Job did nothing wrong. And I was like, again, because we had a dear friend who at a young age was struck down with cancer, terminal cancer. And I came to him one time and I basically was playing the foolish wife. I was like, man, aren't you angry? Don't you want to curse God? And he basically quoted this and he's like, why should I accept just the good things? Yeah. Of course, it's all God's. Yeah. And, so that, again, we get this. And at the end of chapter 2 here, and we're going to finish off the episode with this, we get the introduction of another 3 characters who are going to be really important in the bulk of this book.
Yeah. And they come in, and at this stage, they do the right thing.
Oh.
They sit with him.
Yeah. For 7 days and 7 nights.
Yeah.
In silence.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, there's some wisdom there.
Right there.
It's when they open their mouths that things go wrong.
Big time.
So I think here now you're setting up, so there is this kind of silence before the big dialogue. And even that in the story is a really effective feature. I mean, they're sitting with him, they're appalled, that time of silence, I think shows a genuine empathy. But the discussion shows and is intended to show where all of this goes wrong. In their attempts to work out, okay, why is this now? And that is where the problems arise. And I think at this stage, as we've read these 2 chapters, because we have seen this scene in the heavenly realms, the challenges there, we're cheering Job on. That's it. Hold on, Job. Just hold on, right?
That's it.
Now, the book and the writer wants us to be taking the same attitude towards our own lives. Hold on. I've got to just hold on.
Yeah.
Because my life is part of something so much bigger. There is more going on than I see or hear. So whatever happens, the most important thing is that I keep holding on to God and not let go.
That's it, the first part in the can on the book of Job. Did we cover enough there? I feel like we barely even scratched the surface of this amazing book. We have got so much to get through over these next 2 parts. Now, coming up in a fortnight's time, part 2, this is the bulk of the book. This is all the discussions going back and forth. I really encourage you to head over to thrivetoday.tv, look for the show notes of this episode, and there you can download a PDF. It's a really simple outline that I've put together over the book of Job, and it'll help you understand as we go through the book the different dynamics there. There's some also great links and material to the book of Job. I'd love you to look through that as we get ready, especially for the next part 2. All right, I'll see you over at thrivetoday.tv. Until then, get into the book of Job.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Thrive Deeper. Matthew and DJ really appreciate the questions and thoughts about what you're reading in the Bible as you go through it with Thrive. Our home on the internet is thrivetoday.tv. You can contact us, ask questions, see all of our resources and much more at our website, thrivetoday.tv. The Thrive Today Network is on Facebook. Our Facebook page and links to our community groups are waiting for you. Just search and like Thrive Today page in Facebook now. Visit ratethispodcast.com/Thrive Deeper. If you appreciate what we do and want to help us reach more people, go to ratethispodcast.com/Thrive Deeper. Until next time, our prayer is that these shows will inspire you to go deeper into God's Word and thrive. was another DJP.FM production.